unfulfilled in her spiritual life, bored with daily routines, uninspired by sermons and Bible studies, and apathetic about the future. That's how Heather Johnston describes the complacency that had crept into her life and marriage by the 10-year mark. So where did this discontent lead? Take a look.
The founder of two pro-Israel organizations, Alabama-born Heather Johnston, seeks to educate and connect people at all levels of the two countries. In 2011, she led a tour of U.S. leaders who surveyed Israel's new air defense system.
These 5 members of Congress returned back to D.C., and they created the legislation that tripled the budget for Iron Dome.
In a brand new book, Uncommon Favor, Heather tells how God upended her life's mission and what it really means to be disciples of Jesus.
Welcome to the 700 Club. Heather Johnston. Heather, great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Terry. Great to be with you.
Talk a little bit about how God used that discontent that was in your heart to turn you toward a plan and a purpose that he had that you weren't even looking at the time.
I tell you, it's, one of the greatest gifts I think God can give us is just a hunger, an eagerness. And I believe that's exactly what happened to my husband and I at the same time. And we began a season of fasting and prayer that transformed who we were. And I believe that during that season, the Lord apprehended us. When he wants to really grab a hold of you, he is going to conquer you. And that's what happened during that time frame back in the 1990s and set us in a course toward the nation of Israel.
These congressional tours that we just saw mentioned in the video piece that introduced some of the work that you're doing have had powerful impact. How did those come about?
Well, it was interesting. We had built a national leadership center with the Israeli government and on the hills of Samaria. And I awoke in 2010 and heard a distinct voice say, I want you to lead the congressional tours through Judea and Samaria. And it was so weird because I had never met a congressman before. It was so seemed like a far-flung situation. So I sort of tabled it, and I continued to hear that same word come over and over again for over a year. I had no organization, no resources, no staff, and I had not been involved in politics ever. And it brought me, the Lord brought me into contact with Eric Cantor back in 2010, and he was the highest ranking Jewish official in our U.S. government, the majority leader of our Congress. And we sat down across a table, and I laid out my 4 objectives for an advanced education trip for members of Congress, chairmen of committees. And he looked at me and he said, I have been looking for somebody for over a year now that would lead these secondary trips. We need this so badly. I will populate your tours.
We live in prophetic times. Talk about what's happening with the Abraham Accords under the new administration.
Yes. Well, Terry, we're living in such a convulsing, chaotic world, and yet the goodness of the Lord can be seen in magnanimous ways. And I think it's so interesting in this last year that the Abraham Accords came to the fore. This was in anticipation, I believe, God anticipating these accords to take place. And as you recall, the prophecies out of Isaiah 60, Isaiah 49, at the time of Israel's restoration, there's going to be nations that show up and arrive. And it says that the princes are going to rise up and the nations are going to come to your rising, to the brightness of your dawn. Kings are going to be your foster fathers, the queens, your nursing mothers. They're going to place you on their hips and carry you. Though in anger I struck you, with great compassion, I'll bring you back, O Israel, into your land. And I'm going to open the gates. They will be shut neither day nor night, so that the wealth of the nations can come. Kings will come in procession through your gates. And the nation that won't serve you will perish and be utterly destroyed. And so in the midst of this chaos that we're living in, it's so interesting that God is restructuring things on the earth today. And these alliances, these 5 treaties now that the nation of Israel has with Arab nations, is reflection of that.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the work you're doing with both Israeli and Arab youth, because it's such an opportunity to invest in a unique way.
It is. And, you know, Terry, we really began back in 1997, and we're anticipating, knowing that God was bringing the Jews from the four quarters of the earth still out of the land of the north, that he was going to resettle them in their land. As Ezekiel 36 revealed, they would resettle their cities and live in them. The land would burst into bloom for them. And Ezekiel 36 carries sort of a chronological order to it. And it says, and after these things, I will take out the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. I will put a new spirit in you so that you will follow my decrees and laws. And this was what we anticipated. So we built in conjunction with Israel's Ministry of Education, who holds the largest budget in the nation of Israel today. They have the most influence. And we worked closely with them to establish Israel's National Leadership Center. And in doing so, we were able to bring the confluence of Arabs and Jews together as part of the Israeli society to do training in the biblical heritage and identity. It's been profound. More than 85,000 Israelis and Arabs have come through the training there. And Orphans Promise was represented there as you all contributed to that. And the youth movements of Israel and the IDF and the Mossad and all of the elite forces of the Israeli military have gone through this training.
Heather, your book is called Uncommon Favor, The Intentional Life of a Disciple. What do you want people who read this to take away from it?
You know, I think Uncommon Favor really is a reflection on a group of stories on the unfolding of the biblical prophecies over Israel. It contains a real surprise element in the book for a lot of people because if you're not privy and don't understand what is happening in Israel today, certainly these stories are going to pique your interest and help you to see where Israel is in time and history. It harkens to the relationship between the rabbi and the Talmud of the first century, what it really meant to be a disciple of Jesus and to come after him. And so that theme is weaved in and out of this book.
It's a wonderful book. Step into the flow, folks. Uncommon Favor by Heather Johnston. Heather, thanks so much for being with us. Bless you.
Thank you.